Our next type of hook is a quotation. In a quotation hook, you begin with an engaging quote about your topic from a famous person who is knowledgeable about your topic. Okay, so basketball, here we're thinking Michael Jordan is very knowledgeable about basketball. Most people would know who that is. So here's my example of a quotation hook. Some people want it to happen. Some wish it would happen. Others make it happen, said Michael Jordan, arguably the best player to ever play in the NBA. Here, Jordan talks about how people want to dream, wish, and pray that they will one day make it to the big stage. These are usually the people that never make it. It is only when these dreamers and wishers take matters into their own hands and strive to be the best that they actually get to play. So again, this one can be a little bit lengthy. Okay, we want to be careful to choose someone that the audience actually knows who they are, and we also need to choose someone who is knowledgeable about our topic. And we also want to make sure that the quote that we pick from that person is engaging in its own right. Okay, so the quotation lead is very engaging. I think these are one of the more effective types of leads, but it sometimes takes a little bit of time. I typically go out to some sort of a website on the internet, like Brainy Quotes or something like that, to try to find these types of quotations. And a lot of times the quote that I use isn't on the first page or the second page. I have to dig a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind is that if the person who's reading this has no idea who Michael Jordan is, I do need to give them some feedback and some more information and some context about that. Okay, so here we define who Michael Jordan is, saying he's arguably the best player to even ever play in the NBA. However, if the person has no idea of who Michael Jordan is, that statement by itself isn't quite as powerful. Okay, so make sure you pick someone that people would know, so that as you're talking about the quote that's there, that gives it a little bit more power. Our next type is what's called a startling fact or statistic. When you guys look at the review, they'll actually kind of break these out separately, so we'll look at both. Okay, when you do this, you're going to begin with a stat or a fact that's surprising to the reader, and then explain what it means in relation to your topic. Okay, the difference between a statistic and a fact is just numbers. Statistics often have numbers involved, like the one that you see here. A fact is just a statement that can be proven. Okay, so here's an example of a startling statistic. Just 0.00545% of the 550,000 boys playing high school basketball each year in the United States become a first-round draft pick. That's 1 in 18,333. Okay, so we start with that, right? That's my startling statistic. That grabs my attention, especially if I'm a basketball player thinking I'm going to be a pro. I look at those stats and say, wow, those chances aren't really necessarily in my favor. Okay, then I need to give some background on where this information came from, that it's a reliable, reputable source. Okay, so it says Jeff Rabjans, a writer for the Indianapolis Star, in an article titled Prep Players Face Long Odds of Making It to the NBA. Okay, so again, it's getting a little bit bloated here, right? Because I need to give the source, it makes this hook a little bit longer. Okay, basically only a few high school players will make it to the NBA. Even though there are many that strive, play, train, practice, and fight to be great, a huge majority of them do not make it. Okay, so great example of startling statistic here. Okay, grabs the reader's attention for sure, but sometimes your stats can get a little bit long because you have to provide the citation for that to prove that it's a reliable source. Okay, the other thing is you need to make sure if you're using a statistic or a fact that it's from a reputable source. Make sure that you fact check it and make sure that it's accurate. And finally, not every audience is necessarily going to respond to a statistic. Some people don't find that very engaging. So make sure that you find something that's bold, find something that's startling, and that your audience is going to really look at and be shocked or surprised by. Okay, same one, let's take a look at a fact here instead. Basketball began with hoops made of peach baskets and backboards made of wire. Today, it is a multi-million-dollar industry with fans worldwide. Okay, so again, you'll notice here we've gone a little bit more direct with our citation here, and we'll talk about this in a later unit in the course. But here, Harius is the author's last name, and 18 is the page number where the information comes from. It's called MLA citation. And you'll see at the bottom there what would appear on the works cited page to go along with that. So again, this one's pretty straightforward. I'm just kind of Googling a fact. I'm making sure I find it from a reputable source. The catch, of course, is I still need to give the background information for that source. I need to fact check that source, and I need to cite that source properly. And then once I get beyond that fact or statistic, I need to also kind of explain how it relates back to my particular topic. Our next type of hook is what's called an analogy. Analogies make a comparison between your topic and something the reader would be familiar with. So think about an analogy could be a simile or a metaphor or it could just be an analogy as set up as if like blank is to blank as blank is to blank. So, you know, I don't know, chocolate chips are to ice cream as fun is to basketball would be a way to look at an analogy. Okay, here's an example. A basketball team is like a car engine. With all the parts working together, it is a powerful force. But if one part gets out of rhythm, the whole thing shudders and stops. Okay, so this provides a concrete connection between your topic and a topic that your audience is familiar with, which is great. Catches two things. Number one, analogies do need to be written by you. You can't go out and find someone else's analogy. They are a little bit tricky because you need to really understand a concept or a relationship before you can make an analogy using that. You also need to think about your audience and what type of an analogy they would relate to. So is the person that is reading about basketball going to understand car engines, or is this going to be lost on that particular person? So all that kind of comes back to your analogies, but they are a solid way to hook your audience. Our last one is what's called a bold statement. Okay, and in a bold statement, you're going to make a statement about your topic that's going to elicit some sort of a response from your reader. So maybe they're going to agree with you and nod their head. Maybe they're going to disagree with you and shake their head. Maybe they're going to get angry at the statement you just made, but at least they're engaged in what they're reading. Okay, so here's a great example of a bold statement. Even though baseball is America's pastime, baseball is clearly a superior and more enjoyable sport to both play and watch. Now, your audience is going to have some sort of a connection to that statement. They're either going to agree with it and be like, yeah, I love basketball, it's much better. Or they're going to, if they're a sports fan, be like, well, what are you talking about? Baseball is clearly superior. Either way, they're engaged in your topic. Either way, they're going to continue reading. Okay. If your audience is not sports fans, I wouldn't use a sport to compare it here to. I would use something that they might be able to connect to a little bit better. But this is a great example of a bold statement. Notice it's not stated as opinion, it's stated as a fact. Okay, so I don't say things like I think or I feel or I believe that basketball is a superior sport. I state it directly as a fact, and the person who's reading it has to decide whether they want to agree or disagree with it. That's a great way to hook your audience because they are engaged already, because they either agree or disagree with you, and they want to continue reading to see the points that you're making about the statement that you made that they either agree or disagree with. Okay, so that's a handful of different strategies that you can use as hooks. Okay, as a quick reminder, you're going to go through to the next activity, which will be a Quizlet directly below this video. And in there, you're going to practice kind of matching up the name of the hook to an example or a definition. Continue working on that until you feel completely comfortable that you understand these different types of hooks, and then move on to the lesson that follows, which is going to be talking a little bit more about audience and how audience and hook are connected.